Vacations will never be the same. Welcome to the theme parks of Universal Orlando Resort. With spectacular hotels and more, Universal Orlando offers an entire week of vacation awesome. Visit universalorlando.com.
We're back for another episode of Champions presented by Signature Championship Rings. And today we're joined by two state champions who we're going to get into determining depth and managing reps in spring and summer practices. We're joined by Tom Lombardo, who is the head coach at Cleveland St. Edward High School, actually a suburb of Cleveland, Lakewood, Ohio. Six-time state champion in his career. And then CJ Cesario, who is the head coach at Chicago Christian, just outside the boundaries of the city of Chicago. He's 1 for 1, has done it in his first year there in the 2A division. So coming at it from different perspectives, St. Edward's is in the biggest division in Ohio. Chicago Christian is in the second smallest in Illinois. So I think there's a lot that these guys can dig into, and we're looking forward to it. Guys, thanks for joining me today. I want to take a quick minute to introduce you guys and let each of you say something about yourself. Tom, great to have you back here, a multiple-time guest on the podcast, always offering us great stuff. But for our listeners, remind them of your school and what you guys have done there.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. You do a great job, and thanks for having me and us today and an important topic. St. Edward High School is a Catholic school in the Holy Cross tradition, as you said, in Lakewood, Ohio. We have about 900 between 900 and 950 boys is usually our deal. In our playing football, we'll have between 190 and 200, per year, usually averaging around 80 freshmen, and between 105 to 120 upperclassmen, depending on the year. So this topic is really relevant. We talk about it on our staff all the time in terms of identifying, managing, and determining, who your top guys are, through the process of the off season and even preseason practice and during season.
And then CJ Cesario joining us from Illinois, the 2A state champion there. CJ, welcome to the podcast here for the first time, and would love to just have you share a little bit about your school and what you have going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Keith, thank you for having me. It is an honor and a privilege. And Coach Lombardo, what an honor to be with you as well. I'm excited to hear your knowledge through the years that you've been coaching. So Chicago Christian High School, it is in Palos Heights, just outside of the footprint of Chicago proper. We're on the southwest side. I have a huge affinity for the Chicago Southland area. I also serve as the director of admissions, so I'm heavily involved in kind of, what people would say is the recruiting process. Some people are really scared of that term, but it is what it is. It's a part of it. And so I really believe in the mission and the value and the vision of the school system. And so it's been an absolute honor to be on board for a year and a half now and one football season completed. I was at some larger schools before. This is the smallest school that I have been a part of. And so for us, just from a numbers perspective, as you understand, as Coach Lombardo and myself speak today, opposite sides of the spectrum, as you said, Keith. And so for us, we had 35 total football players, freshmen through varsity last year. And so at the high school, we currently only have 320 students as well, working our way in enrollment to about 400. And so, yes, we'll have very different perspectives, but I'm really excited to share that and how it works for everybody in between as well.
Nurses, are you tired of spending weeks or even months finding the perfect job that matches your specialty with your ideal shift and salary? LinkedIn has improved your job search experience. Search by specialty, the shift you want to work, and the salary you want to make. Go to linkedin.com/nurses and begin searching today. That's linkedin.com/nurses.
Note, side effects may include less time finding the perfect job, working a shift that you love with a salary that can take you to St. Thomas, Jamaica, and continuous smiling because of how simple this process was.
Yeah, I think all of this starts with a philosophy of development and understanding what your thoughts are on developing players. So I'd like to start there, and then we'll let you guys dig into some of these things as we get going. So, Tom, if you would, you and I have talked about development quite a bit, I think, in some episodes here on the podcast. So just share your philosophy on player development to get this kicked off.
Yeah, and like Coach was saying earlier, I haven't always been at St. Ed's. I know it's been, 10 years, but I was at a mid-sized Catholic school before that. I was at a public school that was Division II in Ohio, which is one below Division I. I was Division III Catholic school. and now you're at the biggest one. So I'm interested to hear what Coach has to say as well in terms of how you get the most out of those 35 guys and even in some practice stuff and development. And I think that's, when you talk about development, you have to talk about not only identification, but then how you're going to practice, because you can't develop if guys aren't getting reps or feel they're getting enough reps that they can, they can compete. So I think first you kind of look at it as, all right, you have returners, right? You have players that already did it from last year. You have guys that are up and comers. You have your strong backups. Maybe they were 2s or 1Bs and played a third or a fourth at a time. They were solid JV players that you kind of could put your finger on that these guys are going to be able to help us. Then you always get surprises. You get guys that, like came out of nowhere and just, grew or got some confidence or whatever the case was that are surprises. And you see it kind of early, maybe it's a little later, in the summer or as the season starts. And then you got developmental guys, like guys that are just, they're in the program. They're not quite ready. And I would say freshmen all practice separate for our program, which is probably most common for schools our size. And they have their own staff. And in my tenure, we have never brought a freshman up yet to varsity. They're just mentally not there yet. And maybe some kids physically could have done it, but it was just in their best interest and our program's best interest to keep them as freshmen. And then so we practice 10 through 12 all together. Now we've had a number of sophomore starters. We have 2 linemen at our Ohio State right now that did not start as sophomores. So, you get that strong, All-American Division III type player who's a senior and understands. And then you get your clearly Division I type potential, but not maybe ready to play, doesn't understand as well. So you got to make those balances. And I think, in the off season, our workout program is strong. We test and measure kids and get them there, in terms of body weight, neck circumference, their speed by miles per hour or 40 time. We got a new thing that does miles per hour now. Broad and vertical jump, the shuttle, squat, deadlift, clean, and bench. Gives us a feel for how much the kids have improved in the weight room, which isn't playing football, but it helps. And I value other sports. If a kid's a state champ wrestler or starting in basketball, they have a high level of athleticism that, probably will translate to some position on the football field. So track, baseball, whatever it be. And I feel that's important. So just in identifying and making depth charts in the off season, I'm assuming we're talking now, that's some of the ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, I think those are incredible points of emphasis. And again, for those coaches that are going to be listening to this, you think about your program, you think about where you are, you think about what you're building, you think about the numbers. For us, I want to go even a step before what it looks like to develop a player. I want to talk about developing a person just for a moment. And so we understand that as men that are in these seats, we have the opportunity to pour into, shape, and mold a life almost more than anybody else does. And so I do have the privilege of also being a father. And so I have a 7-year-old son right now. And outside of being an actual dad, it is my belief that there is no greater platform there is to influence and mold and shape a life than there is in the sport of football. And specifically with what we're talking about, Coach Lombardo, you know this through your years, restoring manhood is really important. And the breeding ground that football offers for that to happen through adversity and real opportunity when things are not fair, it really says a lot about, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to understand what life is really like. It's not all rainbows and sunshine. And so for us, developing the person first really matters. And so what we want to do in our mission statement for a football program, and I would really encourage any head football coach that's listening to this, that you have a true mission statement for your program. And so for us, it is to build authentic, strong, ambitious men through the vehicle of football. And then we have a way that looks like, and we have core values for what that looks like for being a person development side of our program. But then player side, we also have a second set of core values for that, and we work off of that. So that way we have these 2 filters. And the 2 filters that we have are is we want to be able to make sure that we are pursuing and creating quality men and elite football players. I think those are the 2 things that are most important. And so a lot of you probably do this indirectly, but just a little bit more of a direct approach from what I'm speaking of, the person first and then the player. And then as far as player development goes, when you really get into the nitty and gritty of that, again, this past season, when I took this role, I knew that I was going to have 27 football players. You even wrap your mind around how you're going to practice with 27 football players, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. So we got to the place where we had 35 football players. For us, we had 13 seniors. They were 13 seniors that were really driven. They were motivated. They wanted to have something that was a little bit more, robust, and it was different. There was not a great experience before, just some infrastructure issues and whatnot. But Coach, to your point, what you said, the first thing we did is we started January 1 in our off-season weight training program, strength and conditioning, acceleration, deceleration, agility, plyometrics, the measurements, the measurables that you're talking about to get a baseline. Coaches, you have to know where your players are. You've got to have a baseline for all of them. And so the measurements that Coach Lombardo was talking about are incredible. And if you can go as far as like neck circumference, that's awesome. We're not quite there yet, but I think that's amazing that you're able to do that. Anything that you can measure, I think has value to it. And so from there, the other things that we really look at, we had 20 of our 22 starters last year. Okay, so smaller programs, those guys that are listening, think about this. 20 of our 22 starters, okay, they really were 10 guys. And so they started on both ways. And so you think about what it looks like to have player development from, hey, if you're in a program that has more numbers like Coach Lombardo does at St. Edward's, what does that look like if you don't? And so for us, things look very different. So I have to be able to train and have player development ready for guys that are going to take 100+ snaps a night, even 120 snaps a night potentially, because we do want to have the best 11 that are out there. And for us, a lot of it was both ways with a lot of those seniors that we had and then other guys stepping up. As Coach Lombardo said, for him, they've not ever pulled a freshman up, which makes sense. And that is a footprint of a really healthy football program. For us, we might have a freshman that has to play. And so we have to work on getting those reps and quality reps really early in the season for us. And so we're planning every single day. I'm getting ready to have a coaches meeting for about 3 or 4 hours tonight that we're really excited about. And we're going to talk about, the logistics of practice and what that looks like, okay? Because for us, everybody has to get reps for us to even have a quality practice. But we have to make sure that we have freshmen that are going to be safe and ready to do some of these things, that we're putting them in healthy situations where they can grow, where they can fail forward and then hopefully succeed by failing forward. And then also making sure that we're getting quality reps and good versus good, so to speak, for our guys that are juniors and seniors. The body is more physically ready, the mind is more mature, and getting them good work because they're going to go against other guys on Friday nights that aren't freshmen. And so there's a lot of nuances and things to consider when it comes to all this. And so, Coach, I'll turn it back over to you with any more thoughts you have, but very different landscapes when you think about, the spectrum of which we're talking about.
That's great stuff, Coach. And looking at it from the perspective, I guess the main point of this, guys, you have to look at it for your program and who you have, what your spaces in the weight room, how many players you have, what class, how to make there's no one way or best way at all. And in fact, we play mostly guys one way, but when we have that when we have that player or because of injuries or just depth of the position, we need to go 2 ways. As Coach said, when he's practicing his guys to develop to play 100 snaps a game, we don't per se. And when we have to, that's a challenge. Travis Hunter I'm in Cleveland here, and the Browns may take him second, but there's a lot of discussion. Well, how's he going to play both ways? How does he go to both meetings? How does he learn everything he needs to know at the pro level to do it? And yeah, high school football is high school football, but there's some similarities, particularly if you practice as a one-way team. It's just not that easy to get everybody caught up and get them going. And this year we had to play about 3 or 4 guys both ways due to injuries or something. So that was a change for us in terms of how we practice. But I want to just quickly piggyback on Coach about developing the person. And also I strongly believe in that. And our school has 4 pillars that I think are important: faith formation, excellence, relationships, and servant leadership. And if you just take those 4, for the school, and I think our school, and I believe that makes a good football team. I mean, hey, our number one job as a Catholic school is faith formation. Like, listen, we don't hide it. I believe in it. We're Catholic, and that's who we are. And not every kid on our team is, but we go to Mass before every game. 13 to 16, we were able to. Somewhere on the road or a circumstance happened with a priest. But the point is, that's important. I mean, if the kids aren't seeing that that's what your main focus is, then it's empty in terms of, even if you win a lot of state championships or a lot of games, there's just an emptiness to it. As Coach said, you're developing the authentic person, the man, and trust me, football's going to end. So that's going to carry, relationships. Well, that's being a teammate. We say brotherhood. Our kids like that term. I think that term's used a lot now. You hear Ryan Day using it at Ohio State all the time. We strive for excellence. And what excellence means is not necessarily wins and losses, but maybe how you do it. how you're treating each other, how you're performing at the highest level, I think is just as important as if you're performing there. You could have success without excellence. You could be successful, you could win games, but you're truly not excellent. What are those intangibles that make you excellent? And I think, servant leadership is, you're trying to develop leaders, and our quarterbacks are leaders. I have the seniors pick up the field, the model for the sophomores what to do, not just, sophomores go get the bags and the balls. I have the starting quarterbacks and the seniors. They do it first to show, hey, they can bend over, they can pick something up, and they can carry it in. And then next thing you know, it's never a problem. Everybody's doing it. So I think just those subtle things, there's many more, but just those subtle things are important. And I would say, A, B, C, D, E, if you want to use the alphabet, what I consider important in our program is A, accountability. I just don't think if you're accountable, you can count on it. And when you have more players or less players, if you don't have an accountable player, if you have less players, man, who could you count on? If you have more players, you're going to fall out. You're not going to make it. Be a good teammate. B, be a good teammate. C, and that's about relationships. C, compete. The Latin for compete is to strive together. And I think that's beautiful. It's not necessarily it's not an enemy you're competing against, whether it's a teammate or something, but it's a catalyst. Hey, we're competing against each other to make each other better. Now, you can only put 11 out there. So there's going to be 100 that aren't out there on a given play. And I tell our kids this is math. But we could all compete and strive together to make each other the best we can be, to have good competition in terms of each other using a catalyst. And then when we see it as the game, the same thing. That guy across from me is my catalyst, not necessarily my enemy. And then, D is do the right thing. You got to make decisions on the field, off the field. And, that sums it up. I think we all have a sense of right and wrong. And E is have some enthusiasm about it. And if you can do those things and you put it together, I think you have a shot. And then the last thing I'll say is the power of the check mark. I'm old school. I got the boxes with their name, boom, 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 what other sport they play. Our coaches fill it out. And I have it saved from every year that we've started playing. I just showed our kids the other day. And, it's that check each day. It's a simple thing, but when that board fills up, boy, oh boy, is that powerful. Ohio State did something, I think, this year with putting bricks. Each day, a kid would go out there and put a brick, 1, 2, 3, and they built it to the national championship. Same idea. And I know in our 21 title team, I had a big box, one more check mark. And I said, we have one more box to check. And I said, after this game, if we get it done, we're all going to come up there and check that box. Because I used that model that year that just a little bit each day. And then that A, B, C, D, E is like, okay, how you do with the check mark? How hard are you working into it? You're there. Now, what are you doing? How powerful is that check? But it starts with the check. If you're not there, it ain't going to work. So if I had to sum up our stuff just generally, I know it's kind of like a little different in terms of not as, but those are the things that we value and I value. And I think you mark those things down. When a kid does a good thing about doing the right thing or being a good teammate, if a kid turns in a phone or ear pods, right, I bring them up in front of the team, so-and-so, Coach Cesario, CJ Cesario here, he found these iPads or Beats or whatever these kids wear now. They found them. Are these anybody? And if the kid comes up, a guy said, now that's being a team, cash. I've had kids turn in cash that they find on the ground. And if nobody finds it, and believe me, it was a problem. But I just think if it's a Catholic school, could you say brotherhood and you're going to take something from a teammate? You just can't function that way. And you have to model, you have to accentuate the good and, have the self, the positive reinforcement. And I think when you do those things, they're tangible ways of living out those missions or statements, pillars, whatever you want to call them, that are important to your program.
Yeah, I think I really love the tools that you're talking about that you have even within your coaching staff. I'm probably going to have to develop and take some of this stuff from you. I love it. So also, coaches, don't be afraid to copy stuff that you see that's successful for other coaches. I'm a firm believer that if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think as much as you can glean and gain wisdom from a Coach Lombardo type person, you need to. And I think, again, while we're talking about player development, you hear us talking about person development and kind of the themes or the pillars that we have or the attributes and kind of, goals that we have for each young man. You have to spend time putting this stuff into your program. I know it seems like you might not have any more time in your day, especially if you're also teaching a subject or whatever you may be doing in your school if you're also in the building. But I guarantee that you have third and short scripted every single Wednesday at practice. But do you also have scripted time where you're making sure that you're pouring into these young men? Because I'll tell you this, part of player development is person development. If you don't think those things coexist together, I would say that you're wrong. I think there's a common misconception that the lie is if I pour into the person side of things, it's going to diminish results on a Friday night. I don't believe that at all. I believe that if you pour into those things and you are excellent with those things while doing the other steps that you need to excellently as well to manage and run and logistically mold a program the right way, it's actually going to enhance your results on a Friday night. Because I'll tell you this, when we had 35 boys that were with us for this year, we didn't focus on the results as much as we did the mission and really trying to mold them into who that we feel God has called them to be. And by focusing on that and giving them those opportunities, the rest followed suit. But I promise you, with those young men that had to take over 100 snaps every single Friday night, the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to do it, the mental maturity that it takes to do it, if we didn't focus on the person first, there's no way we would have won a state championship by the end of this thing. And so I think player development is driven by person development first. That's kind of just my motto with this thing. So
that's really good, Coach. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I think, some other things that are a little more kind of hands-on with player development. And again, I'm going to speak from a 35-man small team that I'm currently aware of. And I was at a place where there were 225 boys that played football. And so I understand both sides of the fence. It was the first time for me where I really had to wrap my mind around what is it going to look like to practice? How are we going to get things done? How is everybody going to get reps? But how is it also going to be safe? And what do I need to do? Because I'm willing to bet that Coach Lombardo and his program, they probably tackle full speed, way more often than we're able to. I have to really consider the safety of my players just to get to a Friday night. And if you're in that sort of seat, you might have to reconsider how often you're taking players down to the ground at 100%. And I believe in a mindset that still says we got to tackle. And I believe in tackling real people and real players. But also, how do I make it to Friday night to make sure I don't injure my starting running back, who's also my starting stud, on the other side on defense. And so we would do a lot of half line work. So for head coaches that have, lower numbers, but you still need to get really good on good reps, we would do a lot of half line work, but still be full perimeter. And so those are certain things that we would do. And so it's got to fit what is best for you. And know that based on the size and the numbers that you have and skills to bigs that you might have, don't think that there is just a one size fits all, because I promise you there's not. There is not.
That's great stuff. And that's true. And actually, we don't go to the ground hardly at all either, unless it's a mistake. It's just,
that's great.
I think football is just adapting that way. In fact, one good thing I got for safety is, inside run in the summer, even if you're allowed helmets and no pads, we usually do before we get shoulder pads and stuff on, we'll take our helmets off and do the inside run and stuff. I was at a Browns practice and they were doing it. We've been doing that for a few years now, because I was thinking Division III, they had no practice with no helmets and would do it. And it just alleviates the shoulder getting hit by a helmet by accident, or guys leading with their mask and someone. We used to get more guys banged up doing that with the helmets on. So we just take them off now. That's been helpful. But yeah, when you look at it and getting guys in there, I guess if we're delving into that world now, I must say I don't have I think about it every year on how we're going to do it. One thing we've come to is a defense, if we want to get team, I hate to say first team, second team, thirds out, threes out, twos out. Now they kind of we use Lions, Tigers, and Bears. They kind of figure out who's what, but we'll move guys around. So if we get 3 different units, we'll call them by, ferocious animals or something. Yeah. And then on offense, we use the red, white, blue, stars and stripes. If we, so as our grouping, and we'll post a depth chart and change it, each day, if especially if guys are battling and, if reds are mostly the ones, I'll move the quarterbacks too sometimes just to keep them on their toes and just to see who can work with maybe some kids that aren't as talented and if they can make play. And it just gives you a whole general sense. That's been good. We usually split our JV and varsity up, so, we'll have our JVs, kind of do an inside run separate, and then a varsity inside run with, it could be Lions and Tigers. There might be some Bears then that we rotate with that, and then we'll have 2 groups. The problem is everything's not equal. There's usually more skill players. You don't have as many linemen. So if you have 3 or 4 groups of skill, you might only have 2 groups of linemen. So how do you balance that? That's a lot of reps for these guys to cycle through there. If anyone has suggestions, man, I'll give my cell on here and call. Let me know, because I've yet to, kind of solve that. And for me, coach, I don't know when you were at Mount, you had the bigger places, but install, let's talk summer. Install where you want to get your stuff in, right? You're installing and yet you're still trying to evaluate. Because the more you install, there's a lot of mental work there. There's a lot of going against cones, and guys can kind of go in and out, but you don't know if they can tackle well. You don't know if they really can do it. So that's why that offseason stuff of measuring speed. Look, there's position-specific objectives that are important. I'll just give them for quarterbacks and receivers real quick. Look, how do I grade it? In order: accuracy, decision-making, mobility, arm strength, and then leadership is sort of subjective. So you can measure these things, a plus minus on an accurate throw, or ADI, accurate, difficult, impossible. Plus minus on the proper decision. Did he go to the right receiver on time? Did he make the proper read in the run game? If you're running power read, zone read, whatever. Mobility, some of those tests tell you what that is. Arm strength, you could get the guy in the middle of the field. Can he throw a comeback to the boundary? Can he throw a post 40 yards? If they can't do some of those things, even if they want to play quarterback, they're not ready. Like, they can't hit those measurable objectives yet. For a receiver, you got to catch the ball. You can measure it. Agility out of the break, you can measure that. Interpreting a route, speed, blocking. So I define these things for positions. And I sometimes I've told the kids, like, okay, who does these things the best as a receiver? Boom, they hit our top guy. Like, the kids know it too. I'm like, look, guys, if you have a disagreement, let me know. But from what I see, this guy is doing these things the best. He never drops a ball. He gets out of the break really well on comebacks. He gets on top on a post. He's got great speed. He interprets routes. Let's say you're running a curl, is it versus man or versus zone? Are you trying to find a window or club and come back down the stem? But the point is, if you can identify some of those, I think kids understand a little. It gives you less problems with parents about why kids aren't playing. And then I realize too, guys are even sometimes, and you could play more guys then. I think if you have more guys that could do it, try and find them on the field, and then there's special teams for ways that guys are on the cusp that they could, be strong on special teams and embrace that role. And I tell kids all the time, guys, I'm not infallible. We're wrong. We may think this, and it takes us 3 games to realize player A cannot do the things we thought he could, and player B might be able to. And we've had different lineups, but week 5 looked a lot different than week 15 in some years, in terms of who was doing what and where and how much time they were doing it with, and then you account for injuries, so you have to build that at least lion and tiger depth pretty good and red and white depth, to have and make kids understand that they can go in there. And I feel bad, with all the players we have, that sometimes kids don't get in the game, and kids that have worked hard in the weight room and done everything right. And I'm a parent too, I feel awful, and I could see it in the kid's face after a game. Even if we win, they sometimes have that dejected look because they, didn't feel that they should. And sometimes parents don't help in terms of what they're feeding. And I feel bad. I really do. But at the same time, you have to do what's right as the coach, feeling that, they still keep a score. So, that's what I try and use terms like the ring doesn't discriminate, whatever role that was there, you're all getting one. Not everybody could run the ball 35 times a game or 30 times or, be the starting quarterback, but there's value to the program. How are you bringing value? And I think the more you let kids see that, the more they get together. But hey, they're still kids in this world, especially with social media, the transfer portal, things of that nature. They see college kids jumping ship right away if they're not getting paid enough, if they're not getting enough time, if they're not this. And coaches are telling kids to go in the portal. Hey, we got 5 quarterbacks. We only need 3. I suggest you to go in the portal. So it's just the world we live in. How do you balance all that with relationships, brotherhood, et cetera, and that side of it, at the college level where it's about money and time, maybe a little bit more now, or even at the high school level where kids go, well, if I want a scholarship, if I'm not on the field as a sophomore, I got to go somewhere else. And that happens with us, so you got to want the value of playing at a St. Ed's, the education at a St. Ed's, the stuff coach was talking about. That's more important than just simply, what am I doing on the field? Some families, kids, parents just aren't there yet. And that's okay. Maybe it's not the right fit. That's the best I can say about it.
Yeah. In terms of, efficiency with player development, I want to go back to a couple of things that you said, Coach Lombardo. The more tools that you can develop, head coaches that are listening, that are done, before practice, you really have to spend time. I have found in the few years that I've been a head coach, preparation is key. You have to spend a lot of time preparing, and don't feel guilty for how much time you spend preparing. You need to do it. Every tool that you can have out on the field for yourself, for the rest of your position coaches to evaluate a player, you need to have. there used to be a chart that I would use even for our 7-on-7 time, right? Or Skelly, whatever you call it, where there's a plus minus system for every single rep. And there's a plus minus going out for every single player that's on the field per position coach. And then we're going to come back and we're going to evaluate it. And then we're going to watch film. I think all of those things are really crucial for it. Other things that I really believe in for player development are making sure that your parents are on board as much as they can be. Because whether you like it or not, at the high school level, mom and dad have a ton of influence, and there's still some reliability and dependence that needs to happen there. And so I have extra parent meetings more than the average head coach to get them on board with our mission and our vision, but also, hey, listen, I need you to understand that I need your son to go to bed at a certain time. I need you to understand that nutrition is very serious. I need you to understand that this is our expectation with communication. And if ever he's even going to miss a winter workout, he is supposed to communicate with me a certain way at a certain time before we actually get to our workout. Those are different things that also go into player development. And so I don't want any head coaches to lose sight on the investment of also getting the parents on board, because you're going to want them on your side as well. I think those are really good things there. Oh, definitely want to talk about this as well. So, Coach Lombardo, you'll be able to speak to this, as well. Over time, what I have seen most is I have seen a lot of coaching staffs, I don't want to say waste, but I want to say not maximize time and potential of indie time, if you still have indie time, when you're doing your everyday drills or things that are the basic skills and fundamentals at your position when you're broken up before you come together as a unit or a half line or a full 11 on 11. I really believe that better player development happens with stacking. And it's a term that I use, is stacking within these everyday drills or indie time that you have. We never focus on one skill at a time in a drill. I think that's garbage. Okay, this is like when you're in the weight room, instead of doing one exercise, you're doing a superset of 2 or a triset of 3 things, and you're getting 2 and 3 things done per drill, while making sure you've thought of how many kids can be getting a rep at a certain amount of time while not too many are standing still. And these are for Friday things that are going to happen on the field. So our coaches know that when they develop any type of indie drill they're going to have, that I'm going to look through it and I'm going to approve that there's at least 2, if not 3 or 4 things being stacked on one another in one drill at a time. So there's not just a handoff that's happening with footwork. There's a handoff with footwork, with an acceleration, with a bag, with a certain cut, with there's a lot going on that's happening, if that's a running back, so to speak. And so I'm always looking to see how I can stack things on that are real Friday night experiences, and I think that's a huge part of player development.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, really, I think experience of a staff together or time together helps.
It does. Guys
have some different ideas. We have we'll have between 12 to 14 varsity coaches and, 8 or 9 freshmen. Again, they practice separate. Getting everyone on the same page, just training coaches not to have huge lines, how to run drills in practice, it takes some time. And, you could sit and meet for hours and hours. And usually after a little while, there's a lot of disagreements and meetings and that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, hey, here's how we do it. It sort of morphs into it. I remember reading Bob Lattiser at De La Salle, their staff was together so long, they would just be able to switch practice right in the middle of it because they knew, hey, we need to work on it. Let's go to the, so I think getting synergy amongst your staff is important. We have a lot of guys in the building still, which I think helps. And so if we don't have official meetings, I'm unofficially meeting all the time via text, via phone call. I'll pop in their classroom, pop in their office. Hey, what do you think of this? Give me this idea. And I'm not one you have to do it this way. I've been doing it long enough that there is no really one way to do it. For everyone that says this is a one must fundamental, this is the way it happened. I'll show you a team that's a state champion, college champion, or that did it opposite.
Absolutely.
So I've learned that, now you may have a way you believe in a way you want to teach, and that's fair, but it's not the only way. And I think kind of figuring all that out and how you run practice is so important. I found less is more. If you're out there too long, we don't, our off season, practice thing in the summer, we have a team meeting, then we'll have position meetings, then we'll practice, and then the defense will lift and the offense will do film, and then we'll do that. And that total time is probably, 4.5 hours or so, but we're on the field, probably 2.5 in the summer because you have to install. A lot of that time is teaching. You don't have all the meeting time the colleges do where you could, I was at Ohio State's practice, the way they did it, they met, They walked through, they took a break, then they did the practice, Well, you just don't have the time to do all that. Now we kind of get close to that in the summer, but in season, we got the field from 3:30 to 5:30. You got to get on there, you got to get rolling and get things going. So, one thing with our 16-week playoff, we've been fortunate enough to win 3 in a row. And then this year we lost in the final 4. So we played 16, 16, 16, and 15 games over the last 4 years. So what I started doing is the Friday to Friday playoff games. Since our kids live, some distance apart, it's not like a public school district where everybody's kind of real close. Hey guys, you play well, you win. Saturday, Sunday, you recover.
Absolutely.
The coaches appreciated it.
Yeah.
They gave us time Saturday to get the films of the next team, to break down stuff we wanted to break down, to kind of get our own thoughts. Sunday, we met as a staff. And Monday, we had a real short hour, 15-minute shell practice, and then did film of our game and introduced the opponent. Tuesday, Wednesday, we went hard. Thursday, we did another hour, 15-minute with shells. It wasn't just helmets and what. And then Friday, we played, and then 2 days off. I'll tell you, so we played our best in the playoffs, I think just because we were fresher. Like, we didn't wear the guys out, and they're already worn out, So there has to be a balance of that as well. Length of season now, is in the day, 10 games, maybe you had 1 or 2 more if you were lucky, when they made less teams in the play. Well, now a lot of teams are making it. The rounds are longer in a lot of states. Boy, oh boy, that's an NFL season almost, for a regular season NFL. So you better model some of that, in terms of not player development, yes, and player availability, part of the development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to piggyback off that too. And literally every single word that you said, Coach, for how you guys do things, Sunday, all the way through is what we did as well. And so if that worked for the highest classification in Ohio, it worked for one of the smallest classifications in Illinois. That is what we do as well. Our players don't come in on Saturday and Sunday. That's a time to rest, recover. Our coaching staff is working hard, and then we meet on Sundays as well. And then, like you said, our Monday is just like your Monday. We go hard Tuesday and Wednesday. You taper back Thursday, and you're playing on Friday. And I would say the same thing. I think we won simply because we were more fresh. And I think there is, again, another misconception or a lie that if I'm not doing everything I possibly can, every single rep, meeting every single moment that I can, then we're not getting better and we're going to lose. And that's just not the truth. There's a way to be very efficient when you guys are on. And there is an intensity that comes with that. With that efficiency, there is a flow, there is a pace that comes with that. And I think those are the things that you should really focus on as a head coach. I think big picture too, we kind of have this thing that we call an annual process. And so what we've just introduced this year is understanding where the coach's mindset and the player development mindset should be for an entire year. Because here's what's really hard, is the year ends, and for both of us, it ended around Thanksgiving or slightly after Thanksgiving. There's a little bit of time off. Everybody enjoys Christmas. You come back. Well, now when we come back in January, it's great to be really excited, and we're doing our off-season workouts and whatnot. But your young teenage mindsets, they live in, oh, wow, I've got 6, 7, 8 months before I really got to start thinking about football in a serious manner. And so for us, we've broken things down into 4 different blocks, 3 months apiece, because we feel like 90-day blocks are better for our young men to be able to handle. So when everybody comes back, or if it's a shorter season, let's call it December through February, that's a building time for you, young man. Like you are building. You are in the weight room. You are getting bigger. You're getting faster. You're getting stronger. March through May, we call that our maturity time. We're still doing our off-season workouts, but there's new ripples that are coming in. You're starting to come, and watch some film during lunchtime. We're focusing on mental toughness for you to mature that way as well in our workouts. Then June through August, it's time to compete, right? This is the time for you to get after it. We got to see where you are. We got to see what we have. We have to see the direction of the bus and where it's going as a program. And then we align together, coaching staff and players, September through November, we execute. And so that's what we call it. There's a time where you're building, maturing, competing, and then executing. And then we have the same thing for coaches. For us, it's rest and research. Coach Lombardo, I'm going to tell you something. I was grateful that we won a state championship. I was exhausted by the end of the year. It takes a lot out of you in the best way. So we're going to rest, and then we're going to start to research December through February. You go to the coaching clinics, you do all the things you do, you rewatch all the games from the year before, and then we're going to have an application period. For us, that's March through May. We're going to apply the new wrinkles that we think we like, the things that we want to try once June gets here, right? Then we're going to find our direction June through August. That's what you're doing as a coaching staff. It's direction time, and then it's execution again, September through November. So that's kind of an annual development process for us, player and coach. So just a small tool that's been really good for us.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm writing those down. Rest and reason.
I'll send them to you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Last thing I'll say, a little opposite of what, our guys are all in right away, so that rest and research, or rest for the players too, between the December, Thanksgiving till we get back to school after Christmas break. They'll do optional stuff, and some kids want to pop in there. But here's what I found with our kids. The overtraining is a big thing because everybody thinks they got to do a little bit more. So we offer, we're going 5 days a week right now. We'll have 3 lifts, 2 speed and skill development days. And we're going pretty hard. In the third phase, I got the maturity phase you're talking about. But then I see film of our kids, they're going out over here and doing this extra speed and this and this and this. And listen, it's better than going and partying and doing whatever else they could be doing, right? It's that. However, you got to keep reminding them. I heard you mention nutrition before and stuff like that. But are you getting enough rest? Is your body resting? If you feel a twinge, and then couple that with they want the scholarships, so they want to go to all these camps in the summer while you're in that other phase in the summer where you're doing in Ohio you get 18 practices before August 1st, basically from the middle of May through July. Well, you're doing your stuff. They're going to these camps. They're busting their butt at these camps. I've seen a lot of kids get wear and tear injuries coming back. They something happens to them, and they're actually defeating the purpose of playing well. Chasing these things out there that is a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but is a necessary thing to do in some ways you do it. So if you're a recruitable player, what schools are really recruiting you? Which camps really are going to give you the most bang for your buck? Hey, we like you. Why don't you come to camp? Or they're calling you, hey, listen, come to camp. You may have a shot for a scholarship. And I can't decipher that sometimes. Like college guys, they want guys at their camp. They want to look like they're doing well in their recruiting area or position area. Maybe you're really not on their board, but they want to, so the kid doesn't know. They're traveling all over the place, wearing themselves out. And all they're doing is hurting themselves, literally, to play their best football in the season where it really may matter to get to the next level. So I've seen more and more of that, through the years as well. That has to be balanced, kind of explaining to kids that this is out there. They think they're invincible. I've had more hamstrings and back and hips and hip flexors and that nagged them throughout the year from what they did in the summer.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say as we wrap up is so for the multi-sport athlete, which you have a ton at your school, Coach Lombardo, I have a ton at my school as well, especially when we're talking about that January through May time. We want them to be at every single football workout, right? Well, at our school, more than half of our student body participates in a sport, and then half of those kids that do participate in 2 or 3 sports. And so head coaches, I'm going to tell you this. 1, I think you need to work to have good relationships with the other head coaches that are in the building. Don't be headbutting with the basketball in the do whatever you got to do to get along, and then understand when other guys are in their sport in that primary season, you might have to be okay with them not being at every single football function. And I've just learned that it's better that way. And again, that goes back to the overtraining piece. So I just really believe in working on those relationships the right way. And if a guy's a baseball player in the spring, he might not make it to every single workout. He still has to make it to the ones that he can, but you got to give and take during that time of the season, which I know is tough.
Yeah, and I'll just let one thing I think we do great, which has been huge for us, is just that we have one strength coach in our building that is really tight. So the baseball player, if they come, or the track guy lifts in the morning, they don't have to. They're not required to do it the same as the non-playing sport football players. But if they get checked on the same sheet that they met their requirement while they're playing their sport, that's awesome. And that's so I credit that as 100% that they're there. I'd rather them be competing, running the 100, and doing what they can lifting wise. That's helping them do that and be strong enough to play football. And they usually go hand in hand. I find the kids that do that are playing that other sport better.
Yeah,
most of the time.
Absolutely,
guys. Just a ton of insight here on, I think, the holistic development of the player, right? We talked about getting these guys ready in the non-competition, not a game at the end of the week. But, you covered the whole spectrum of how you're going to develop people, how you're going to develop these athletes. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys taking time and sharing with us. And Tom, best of luck to you and St. Edward here. And getting another one here in 2025, and CJ setting the bar high. Got to go after a second one for Chicago Christian. So thank you to both of you guys.
Thank you so much. An honor to be with you guys. Meet you.
Send me those off-season things.
I'll
on the
send you
email
everything. Absolutely, Coach Lombardo. I'd love to come hang out with you guys in Ohio sometime too.
Hey, anytime. I got some good Italian restaurants. Probably not as good in Chicago, but we got some good ones here.
I love it. All right. Keith, thank you again, man. This was an honor.
Whether it's shifting schedules, mixing in competition, or just knowing when to back off and let kids be kids, these guys are showing what championship programs do when no one's watching. If you got something out of this episode, be sure to share it with your coaching network. And as always, Champions is brought to you by Signature Championship Rings, where your legacy is our mission. Until next time, keep leading, keep grinding, and keep building champions.